Thank you, Sarah. First, I'll just say that a lot of the work I'm showing is work I did at Argonne, but these are my opinions, for the record. I will advance to the next slide. All right, so just a little background for me. Chemical engineer. I started in north central Wisconsin, Marathon County, near Wausau, 2-year center. Then I transferred to Madison, where I got my bachelor's. Then I wanted to go into electrochemistry, focusing on fuel cells, batteries, and that is in Charlottesville. And then my professor, after I was there for a year, decided he wanted to go to Florida, where he got tenure. Sorry, hitting the wrong key. You notice though that the color sequence is getting redder, hotter, and I wanted to get back to the cooler areas. So I went, took a postdoc position at Argonne National Labs, and that would have been back in 1993. So as I was saying before, I was working in the molten salt battery program at that time, a 25-year-old program. I was like one of the last people hired in that program, which also meant I was the person who had to clean it up after it ended. So I'll move on. Just a little background on electric vehicles. People think of electric vehicles as something in the future. It's really in the past. We're all used to gasoline-powered vehicles, but in the late 1890s, early 1900s, electric vehicles were the vehicle to have. They're very easy to use. If you look at these, well, this is from a car museum next to Luray Caverns in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. If you ever get a chance, I would highly recommend it. It's probably one of the best cave systems you'll ever see. What I'm showing here is a 1908 Baker electric, and I know the words are a little fuzzy, but it does say that it was easy for women to use, very popular with the ladies of the day. And really, if you think of anything electric, you just turn a switch on and it moves or it goes. But before then, you had to, before the electric starter, you had to hand crank that engine. And there's no fuel injectors to inject your fuel. You had to keep cranking that. But every so often it would backfire, and that comes back at a very fast speed. If my grandfather was a young teenager, it backfired and broke his hand. The doctor wanted to cut his hand off, and my great-grandmother said, no, we won't do that. And she came up with her own physical therapy to heal the fingers. But she did it all on her own back in the 1920s. So, but if you look at the record for electric vehicles, it was the first car to exceed 60 miles an hour back in 1899. And if you read stories back then, there used to be this thought that if the body went 60 miles per hour, that the organs would shut down. It was, nowadays, if you're not doing 60 on the freeway, you're going to have other problems. So it was certainly, it was setting records. It was the best-selling car in 1900. But then you had the electric starter come in 1911, and now you could just let your starter turn that engine as long as it needed to start. Still, that was basically more a luxury vehicle. To have a vehicle back then was a luxury. And one thing you'll notice, and this is in the American History Museum in Washington, D.C. It's another, this is the Columbia Electric runabout. One thing you'll notice, no steering wheels. They had tillers. So we think before 1900, before 1910s, everybody was horse and buggy. The mechanism of turning, you really think in terms of like a ship, like a boat. You have, oars or something. So they actually put tillers in. It wasn't until later we had a rack and pinion where you actually put a steering wheel. Sure. Oh, the question about the starter. The starter ran off of a battery, so there was some type of battery, probably a lead-acid battery in those days as well, and that would turn a motor to turn the engine. That was a huge breakthrough, and that was one of the reasons why the electric vehicles basically faded away.
You just answered my question. It was such a great thing. Why did they
Yes. The other thing is why the electric vehicles also went away is because of the range of the vehicle. And if you look at Thomas Edison, 1880s, there's famous quotes about him thinking secondary batteries, rechargeable batteries was a Ponzi scheme. But yet, by the 1900s, he was investing heavily in trying to develop batteries for electric vehicles. And he was famous for developing the nickel-iron battery, water-based battery. And he had this runabout. He has a 1901 there and a 1910, I think, runabout. The range wasn't too bad, 144 miles. Average speed was 12 miles per hour, which sounds really slow, but back then, horse and buggy was 3-4 miles an hour. You could walk at 2 to 3 miles an hour, so you're making good speed, and your roads really weren't that good to go much faster. And this vehicle weighed about a ton, 1,000 kilograms. So it's relatively acceptable, but again, the next year, you had the electric starter come out. So I'm going to give some terminology here. This is where it kind of gets into the technical part. But I promise you, this is Lazadro, so I do have pictures of minerals in the talk. So you won't leave disappointed, hopefully. So capacity. Now, capacity is the number of electrons that you can put in a negative electrode during charge or take out of a negative electrode during discharge. And you usually measure that in milliamp hours per gram. So kind of a way of electrons per gram in that material. Then energy is the capacity times the average voltage. And power is voltage times current. So it's the rate at which you can deliver that energy. So I know a lot of times you read newspaper articles, they mix up the terminology for power and energy. But power is, like you think of horsepower, or watts, kilowatts. Energy is like joules, or how much actual heat you get, how much work you can do. Another terminology, cell. A cell is an electrochemical couple, a negative and a positive electrode. So like your AA, AAA, C's and D, those are technically they're cells. For marketing, we call them batteries, but technically they're a cell. So in the battery world, we talk about cells. When you put cells together, that makes a battery. A 9-volt battery, your alkaline battery, is 6 alkaline cells put together in series. That's how you get the 9 volts, 6 times 1.5. Now, your lead-acid battery is 6 lead cells put together. So if you open up a lead-acid battery, you'll see there's 6 compartments. That's how you get your 14 volts out of it. Cathode is what the material scientists kind of call the positive electrode. The negative electrode is often nicknamed the anode. When you're talking to pure electrochemists, there's only positive and negative electrodes. Cathode and anodes refers to oxidation and reduction. So that's a little bit of side problems. Oops. Okay, now one of the things we want to do is measure the density of a battery, the energy density. You can measure it in terms of the volume, watt-hours per liter, or by weight, watt-hours per kilogram. So in Thomas Edison's day, he was working on these aqueous batteries down in here. So here's lead acid. This is a modern day lead acid battery. So it's about 25 watt-hours per kilogram. Then you had your nickel cadmiums, and they were being replaced by nickel metal hydride. So that nickel iron battery is in this ballpark. So with lithium-ion, when that came out, that's this oval here. Lithium ions were down here, then they kind of moved up into this region. Then you have lithium polymer. So lithium polymer, a little bit higher energy per gram, but a little less on watt-hours per liter. Then you hear the term lithium metal batteries. So that's where the negative electrode is actually lithium metal. One thing you notice is you get a lot of energy per weight, but not really much gains, or really no gains in per volume. And that's because lithium is very low density. Its specific gravity is 0.5, so it's volume for volume, it's half the weight of water. So when you throw a lithium piece on water, it floats. and well, it violently reacts, but it floats. Naturally, we have goals. So one of the most famous is this J. Caesar goal, Joint Center for Energy Storage Research, headed by Argonne. We have the Battery 500 goal that's run by Pacific Northwest Lab, and Argonne also participates in that. Then you have the NASA goal. Then we have this EV everywhere goal. The idea behind the EV everywhere is if we have batteries with this energy quality, then we can essentially replace gasoline vehicles with electric vehicles, all other economics aside. And you notice that we are essentially there. So EVs are reality, and I'll show some more slides on that later. Okay, this is the electromotive force table, you could say. It's really a way of measuring how badly does a material want to have an electron. So if at the bottom is lithium metal, down here, we set that at 0 volts. The top is fluorine at about 6 volts. So lithium metal hates electrons. It wants to give away its 1 electron. And fluorine wants to take that 1 electron and form hydrogen fluoride, or lithium fluoride, sorry. Now, in between, you have all these other chemical reactions and the potentials that they would occur at. So most of your alkaline batteries are in this range. Your zinc versus MnO2 battery, your alkaline battery. One thing to notice is this blue box here. This is the electrical stability window of water. If you put water with lithium, it reacts violently because lithium is trying to reduce it. It's forcing its electron onto the water. Likewise, if you take water and go up to a higher voltage, it reacts as well. The oxygen, you start having oxygen evolution. So here at the bottom, you have hydrogen evolution. Here you have oxygen evolution. People who work with lead-acid batteries, especially auto mechanics, every so often a lead-acid battery will blow up. If it's overcharging, you generate hydrogen at one electrode, oxygen at the other electrode, and if you have a spark, they explode. So I actually did that in high school once when I was welding on my dune buggy. So how you can get higher voltage batteries, because remember, higher voltage gives you higher power, and it gives you higher energy. So if we can get outside of water, water is really limiting us to this basically a 1.5, almost 2 volt window, like for lead acid. We can then look at other cell couples. So we can now look at things like lithium, graphite. Graphite is just about 100 millivolts above lithium in terms of potentials when it's fully lithiated. And on the positive side, we can now look at other things, these layered materials, these lithium metal oxide materials. You notice these are up around 4.5 volts. The graphite is around 100 millivolts, 1 volt. So now we have a 4.4 volt battery, whereas before, with your alkaline batteries and your lead acid, you're limited to like 1.5, 2 volts. So we got almost a 3 times increase in energy and power just by getting rid of water, going to a carbonate-based solvent. So that solvent, carbonates, they can go up to about 4.5, 5 volts, and they can go down close to the lithium potentials. As I said before, nothing really survives lithium potentials. There's one material that's slightly lower, but for all purposes, lithium is the bottom of the power table.
So you're saying that's the cell voltage?
Yes, if you take, well, it depends. You have to have something gives up an electron and something's taken an electron, that you 2 half cells to make a full cell. And so you take this one reaction where it will give up a lithium and also an electron with it. And that's basically a charging situation. So you've taken that lithium and you're pushing it into this graphite down here at about 100 millivolts. So the difference between that line and that line is basically your theoretical voltage. So likewise, you can take this cathode material, which I'll talk about later, the lithium iron phosphate, we call it LFP for short. It will give up a lithium. This graphite will take that lithium. And now that difference, 0.1, and here you have about 3.5, so that's a 2.4 volt battery. Sorry, 3.4 volt battery. We also have this as an anode, where this can take a lithium. But if you take this LFP and this LTO, lithium titanate, that's one of the most stable batteries around, except for the problems with gassing because of the electrolyte for a different reason, which we won't have time to really go into here. But that would be the voltage there, and it's really the same voltage as the alkaline battery. So you don't gain a whole lot. So if you can get higher milliamp hours per gram in those materials than the alkaline systems. But there's benefits to those systems. Mm-hmm. Lithium ion. Yes.
So which one would that be?
Okay. I'll just repeat the question. So she was asking about the batteries on an electric lawnmower. Most likely that's a lithium ion battery system. It may be a lithium polymer battery system. Most likely lithium ion, probably it's probably this material here and graphite. And if you take the voltage of that battery and divide it by like 3.8, they'll tell you how many cells are in that battery. Okay, so how does the battery work? So because these are rechargeable batteries, you can have the electrons going in two different directions. So when you charge, you're pulling an electron out of the positive electrode. It goes through the charger. It comes around and comes into the negative electrode. And then likewise, that lithium has to leave the cathode or the positive at the same time and then transfers across this electrolyte separator, and then it goes into the negative electrode. Likewise, when you discharge, now you have your lithium and your electrons over here. The electron goes out, does work, whatever power thing you're trying to power. Then it comes back, electron comes in, the lithium ion comes across. Okay. Excuse me.
It's like a lithium exchange.
Yes. So your lithium goes back and forth, and the electron goes back and forth. It's the electron that actually does the work. So one thing you have to look at is everything's called a lithium-ion cell, but it's really a whole mixture of different options here for your positive electrode. You can have any of these materials, lithium cobalt oxide, NMC we call it, nickel manganese cobalt oxide, then your lithium iron phosphate, your lithium titanates. So those can all be in a lithium-ion cell, usually not mixed together though. On the negative side, it's usually graphite, but you can also have some silicon in there, and also some, once in a while, the LTO as your negative electrode. All right, this is just a little crystallography, or I should say crystal structure, what's actually in that cathode particle. So you have your transition metals, that's these red atoms. Then you have oxygen layer, then a lithium layer, and then that repeats. So when you pull out the lithium, it comes out of that layer. Naturally, if you pull out all your lithium, there's nothing holding that together again, and it exfoliates. So you could generally take about 70% of your lithium out. You don't want or cannot take out all your lithium without destroying it's like a Jenga. You want everything to stay together so you can put the lithium back in there. You want the lithium-ion cells can go thousands of cycles if you take care of them, keep the temperature under control. Now, what's really cool is, thanks to modern science, the STM, transmission electron microscope, you're actually seeing those are manganese atoms there. And the dark spots are the lithium atoms. Now, if you look from the top, if you look from the top, you're seeing hexagonal patterns, of how those manganese and lithiums align. Okay, oops. Now, if you look on the negative electrode, graphite, Graphite has basically honeycombs all together, and then they're stacked on top of each other. So here's your lithium atom, and that sneaks in, and its electron comes with it, and that's sitting in between these two rings. So you picture a ring above it and a ring of carbons below it. And like I said before, lithium, when lithiated graphite is fully charged with lithium, it wants to react with almost everything, including the electrolyte. So the electrolyte reacts at about 0.8 volts above lithium potentials. So what happens is you form decomposition products on the surface of that lithiated graphite. We call it the solid electrolyte interface layer. It's basically a passivation layer, just like rust on steel. It passivates. It slows down the reaction underneath. So you can get, I like to say, batteries in general, when they're fully charged, they're unstable. Neither electrode wants to be at those two ends. They want to be discharged. They want to be in the middle. So the goal of engineering is trying to make that unstable system, when it's fully charged, make it last as long as possible for as many cycles as possible. So that's where all the material scientists come in and all the engineering to make that happen. Yes?
I use a computer for lithium-ion battery inside of it. If you charge it and use the battery at the same time, why does it get hot?
Good question. The question, why does your battery in your laptop get hot while you're charging it and using it? Often it's not the battery that's hot, it's the processor, your computer processor. There's so much electrons going in and out of that little computer chip that if you know where the battery is, your battery should not be hot in your laptop or your phone. So in that case, the really hot spot is probably by the processor, the computer chip. So they try to keep the computer chip away from the battery because when you have a laptop, and especially when people put on their beds or on their clothing or pillow, it plugs the air vent. There's a little fan blowing. That fan is cooling the computer chip, not the battery. But your computer chip can get so hot, it can overheat the battery, which is just a few inches away. So that's why you should always keep your laptop on a hard surface and not plug any of the vents.
So you should not have it plugged in and use it at the same time?
Regarding plugging in and using it at the same time, if you want the most life out of your cell phone or your laptop, never keep it fully charged. If you keep it below like 90% state of charge, it'll last the longest. Because as I say, when a battery is fully charged, everything wants to react with everything around it. And if you pull off a little of that energy, you'll get a longer cycle life, longer calendar life. So usually you plug your laptop in, charge it up to 80, 90%, then unplug it, use it. But the problem is you have to remember to plug it in before you get the low battery sound. Okay. All right. Here's where all the science and engineering comes in. So you can really think of the battery research in three general areas. You have the atomic molecular scale. So that's where people are working on the crystal structure, trying to create different additives in that crystal structure. Do we put in nickel instead of the cobalt, manganese instead of the cobalt, throw some aluminum in there, just to see what effect that has on at the crystal structure scale. The next scale up is going to be your mesoscale. So that's really looking at the particle itself. You have primary particles, and they agglomerate together to form a secondary particle. And what's the size of the particle? What crystal faces do you have on those primary particles? And then there's the electrode cell scale. So that's where you're actually making the cell. So everything you see there is basically the electrode cell scale, and that's the level as an engineer where I work at. I work in this region. So we make electrodes, a positive electrode, so it's cathode particles on aluminum foil, both sides. This blank here is a separator, and then here's your copper foil, and that's graphite on both sides of that copper foil, and then they're wound or stacked together, and that gives you your full cell. Okay, back to pictures again. So this is basically why I was hired at Argonne. Back in the early 90s, California had a law, the zero emission vehicle, the ZEV. They were saying that any car company that can make a zero emission vehicle by, I think at that time was like the year 2000, that they would have dominance over all the California market. So then there's this race, people trying to do fuel cell vehicles, trying to do battery vehicles. The first company, say if GM gets the EV in the California market, or zero emission vehicle, then California would say all you other car companies cannot sell. That was, there's a lot more details behind that law, but that was a big push. So I was hired to work on the molten salt program, trying to make high temperature battery for vehicles. But GM went ahead and with what was available, which is the nickel metal hydride battery and the lead acid battery. And this is, I know Michael Moore had that movie, Who Killed the Electric Vehicle or something like that. It's entertaining to watch. But the problem was, when you look at this vehicle, that's my wife there, we're on vacation. This is in Washington, D.C. If you go in the American History Museum, it's right on the first floor, walk in that main door. It's relatively small. You can do, the speed's okay, 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, the range 90 miles. It's a lead acid battery, 18 kilowatt hours. Not really a whole lot. You get about 4 kilowatt hours per, 4 miles per kilowatt hour. If you had more money, you could get the nickel metal hydride version that gave you a little bit bigger battery in the same space. You got 120 miles. They only leased these vehicles. They never sold them. And they made several thousands of them, and that's why they're able to call them back, because nobody actually owned them. There's only a few that exist in the world. GM called them all back, because at some point, they're liable for every one of them, and they don't want to service all these vehicles for the next 20, 30 years. But this is what they learned a lot in the electronics. How do you do the electric vehicle? What's your motor, your DC-DC converter, et cetera. And that's what they learned. They really had to set the ground for what do you need to have an electric vehicle. Then it just became, where do we get the battery from? So now if you look at lithium-ion batteries, so now because a lithium-ion battery has 3-4 times the amount of energy of those water-based batteries, lead acid and nickel metal hydride, for that same space, I can now have a 4-door vehicle. This is a Chevy Volt, pure EV, 240-mile range, and that's a 60 kilowatt hour battery. And this is from 2017, so they've gotten better. I didn't take any modern prices because, if you look at the car market right now, it's kind of crazy. So, but this is, it's a reasonably priced vehicle, and then you also get credits starting out. Then you look at the Tesla, the Model S. They had a ludicrous mode, and that was 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. So picture yourself standing here, 2.5 seconds later, you're doing 60 miles an hour. That's a pretty good acceleration. Range 340 miles, 90 kilowatt hour battery, which is now kind of most batteries are towards that 80 to 100 kilowatt hour size. This is a high price. And if you look back at when they're selling these, they were not selling them as an EV, they're selling them as a luxury vehicle. So, the $150K price tag is the luxury price. It has all the bells and whistles because, it's fully electronic.
What part is the ludicrous mode?
I think the 2.5 second part, 0 to 60. So it's designed for the car enthusiast, somebody who really wants to show off. And those first Teslas that came out, that's why I kind of got that associated with rich people, because they were going after the luxury market. Okay, so back to a little bit of science here. This is a nickel manganese cobalt oxide particle. It's NMC 532. There's primary particles connected with secondary particles. There's generally about 15 to 20 microns in diameter for the secondary particle. If we test this versus lithium metal, we get a voltage profile, and then we get our milliamp hours per gram. And as an engineer, those are numbers I need when I'm designing the electrode. I should point out, too, that Argonne developed the NMC material and have the patent on it, which that was like 20 years ago, basically. So there's a lot of press releases on that. So it was one of the big success stories in our department. Okay, now another engineering plot. So how to increase the energy? One way is to increase the amount of nickel in that cathode, in that NMC cathode. The other way is to just run it up to higher voltages in charging. So what I have here is the first charge, and then basically the 8th discharge. So this is like when it's all broken in. So to get my milliamp hours per gram, and based on how high I charge it. So you would think, well, why don't we just do everything here at the high voltage? Well, higher voltage, things aren't as stable. The electrolyte's not quite as stable, and the cathode's not quite as stable because I pulled out a lot of those lithiums. So now my Jenga block is starting to fall over. So the goal is to try to stabilize these materials. One thing, reason you're going for a higher nickel, partly to reduce the cost, because cobalt, you're taking out cobalt, putting in nickel. Cobalt is expensive. But also you get this increase in energy as you increase the amount, increase in capacity, therefore increase of energy as you increase the amount of nickel. Okay, now I'm just going to switch quickly to the negative electrode. Generally, it's graphite material, and most of the research is now trying to incorporate some silicon in the negative electrode. So here's a graphite particle. There's kind of a flaky material, you know, because it's like graphite grease. Those graphene sheets can peel off. And then you're also seeing silicon particles. So here's the voltage profile for graphite. So as you're lithiating it, it has these different plateaus, different staging as you're putting lithium into those little honeycomb niches. And you get about 350 milliamp hours per gram. Now silicon, pure silicon, you can get about 3,000 to 4,000 milliamp hours per gram in it. But unfortunately, silicon expands greatly when you put lithium into it. Another problem, so here I made electrodes that are 15% silicon, the rest graphite. And you see, as I'm discharging, I have a higher potential, which on the negative is, you think of it in the reverse way, so it's that's not a good thing. We want to be down low, close to these lithium potentials. But the problem is when I discharge, I have this big hysteresis. You like to have the charge and discharge as close as possible, because that's what gives you your energy efficiency. So that's some of the work that we're doing in silicon, trying to get rid of that hysteresis. I like to show this plot because it's the same silicon electrode, where here I have just 5% silicon with graphite. And as you add more silicon to your cell, it swells. You put lithium in silicon, it swells. And then that cracks your passivation layer, and then it reforms, and then next time you charge, it cracks again. So always have a little bit of gassing issues and cycle life issues. But when this is graphite electrode in different states of charge. When you get all the way up to 100% state of charge, and you take the cell apart, it's a bright, shiny yellow brass color. That's just 60 millivolts above lithium potentials. If I hit it with a drop of water, it explodes, because it has very high surface area, and it really wants to react with water. If I add some silicon in there, the color is a little muted, but it's generally it's still also very reactive. Okay, and this is the plot you're probably most interested in. This is, this is from the USGS. These are all things that your tax dollars have paid for years. It's the relative abundance of elements in comparison to silicon. So they set silicon right here at 1 million. So for every million silicon atoms, you have, let's see, that's 25 lithium atoms. But if you look at cobalt, now you're looking at about 15 atoms of cobalt. So this is a log plot. So you know, like I say, lithium, you have 250 lithiums for every million silicon. Cobalt, it's about 15. So nickel and copper are just a little bit higher, they're a little bit more abundant, but cobalt is difficult. And also, where does the cobalt occur? So common things like your iron, manganese, these are, there's no issue about really running out of those, even for that matter, aluminum. Your lithium isn't too bad. These are actually the rare earth elements, which really aren't all that rare. They're just called rare because at the time they were rare. But something like lanthanum. Lanthanum is the lanthanum nickel 5, the nickel metal hydride battery, that's as abundant as cobalt. If you look at your rare earth metals down here, this is what's in your catalytic converters. This is why people steal catalytic converters. So you're looking at, what was it, 1 atom of platinum or palladium for every billion atoms of silicon. So that's why, and if you think of iridium, that's your kryptonite for dinosaurs. So that's even more rare. All right, a little bit of engineering here. Engineers love spreadsheet models. So this is BATPAC. It's also in our battery department. It's a techno-economic model for designing batteries based on material properties that you have, the voltage, the resistance, the milliamp hours per gram. And then you can design the size of your cell, how much energy it has, how much the cost it'll have, all the way up to the battery pack. So if we take some of those numbers, different materials, I'll try to speed up here because we can figure out how much of every element is in a 100 kilowatt hour battery, which is kind of the new standard for EVs. So that's a vehicle that can do 400 miles. And you'll see that for the high nickel material, what we call A11, so that's 8 nickels, 1 manganese, 1 cobalt. That's how you read those numbers. We can see that that battery will have about 7 kilograms of cobalt, about 10 kilograms of lithium. Manganese is about the same. And your nickel is actually fairly high, about 60 kilograms. And again, nickel is not all that abundant. It's better than cobalt, but we would ideally like to get away from nickel and cobalt. And that's where we get into these other cathode materials, the lithium iron phosphate, which is basically just iron. There's lithium, iron, phosphor, and oxygen. And the lithium manganese oxide spinel, which is manganese and lithium and oxygen. In this system, we assume that the aluminum, the reason aluminum is so high is that the battery is going to be aluminum hardware. In vehicles, they try to put aluminum wherever they can to lightweight the vehicle. That's why there's very little steel in this system. Copper, there's a lot of, the copper foil in there. There's aluminum foil, that's your electrodes. But there's also, for copper, there's all the electrical interconnects connecting all your cells together and connecting to your main battery pack harness. Okay, where all these minerals come from? I challenge anybody to find the United States on there. The closest you come is Canada. So your lithium is unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, for lithium, a lot of it comes from brine water in Chile, Bolivia. So about 44% of that. For the museum here, though, you'd like to see that it comes from some nice pretty mineral. For lithium, it originally was coming from spodumene. And that's, I have a slide on that later. There actually is some straight down this hall. I think it's the back wall. So it should definitely stop and see it. So that was in the United States. But the main sources are still Chile, China has some, and Argentina. Natural graphite. Natural graphite ore you just grind up into the right particle. Yes?
Is that due to the cost reasons that we don't dig them in the U.S. or because they're just not in the U.S.?
The question on is that due to cost reasons because it's not being produced here or it's just not in the United States? I would say kind of yes to both. For lithium, we do have a lot of lithium in the United States. It's just economically cheaper to take it from Chile because it's literally the brine water. We really don't have any decent natural graphite deposits in the United States. They all tend to be in China and India, and there's also some in Australia. Cobalt, again, we do actually have some cobalt. I'll have a slide on this too. We do have some cobalt reserves in the United States, but it's for the sheer size of the lithium-ion battery market and what's being projected. I'll show you that later. we need to import cobalt or keep looking for it. But a lot of your cobalt is coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo. It used to be Zaire. It's always a byproduct of copper and nickel production. It occurs with copper and nickel. So in the Congo, they have a lot of copper deposits, and that's how they're getting the cobalt. Nickel is coming from laterites and pentlandites, so mainly from Indonesia, Philippines, and some from Russia. Okay. All right. Remember I was talking about the lithium iron phosphate? So it's the only battery material for lithium-ion systems that exists in nature. So it's the olivine structure. It's called triflite. I'm trying to find them. I don't know if Lizadro has some, but I've seen it in Washington, D.C., their museum. It has the exact composition of the battery cathode material, lithium iron phosphate. So it has a natural stability because these minerals have been around for hundreds of millions of years. Unfortunately, it just has a lower energy density. So, but it is considered one of the most inherently safe materials. Next is the spinel, lithium manganese oxide spinel, not found in nature, man-made, but it's kind of based on the spinel structure. Here's what's called the Haussmannite. This is that classic spinel structure, 3 cations, 4 oxygens. And if you replace that manganese and put a lithium there, that's how you have that cathode material. Unfortunately, though, the manganese spinel, when you get to a little higher temperatures, there are a lot of manganese spinel batteries, but if they get up above 40 degrees Celsius, up over 110 Fahrenheit, you'll start to have what we call manganese dissolution. So when that manganese goes over, deposits on the negative electrode, and then it just catalyzes more electrolyte decomposition. So generally, you try to keep these batteries cooler. Room temperature is fine. Keep under 80 or 90 Fahrenheit. But they also have lower energy density. So I would say that the energy density is not so much of a problem if you have an abundance of electric vehicle chargers, and that's part of the bioinfrastructure laws. They're putting like EV chargers as many places as possible. If you look back at those old gas engine cars back in 1910, 1920, and you're living out in the country, how big was your gas tank? You see pictures of people going on road trips, they'll have half a dozen 20-gallon gas tanks in the back instead of luggage because there wasn't gas. It took a while for gas stations to catch up to the gas cars. Kind of the same with electric vehicles. Why doesn't your car have a 100-gallon gas tank? Because it doesn't need one. You can pull over every 10 miles to get gas. Okay, lithium sources. I will say it's predominantly coming from brine water. But I like to say the kunzite's a lot prettier. So here's kunzite. It's a version of spodumene. And as I said before, if you go straight back here, look there, they have a huge piece of kunzite and spodumene right behind it. So it's a very nice sample, straight back that way, the far wall. So it's not the only sources of lithium. FMC Lithium in North Carolina, and they also have there's also a facility in South Dakota. They're originally the producers of lithium going back to the 1950s and maybe before. But then when they started finding the brine water in South America, particularly Chile and Bolivia, that was the cheaper way of getting lithium, was to take brine water. But we still do process spodumene, and in Asia too, they have more spodumene, so they'll use that for the lithium source. Nevada has huge deposits of hectorite clay, so that has upwards of like 6% lithium in the clay material. So, this fear that we're going to run all lithium with the brine water, well, there's other sources of lithium. And we're finding lithium brines in the United States and Southeast United States. We have lithium brines under Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia area. So it's part of its economics. Take the cheap lithium first before you have to go, just like oil. Take the cheap oil first before you have to go to get the more expensive oil. So now we look at cobalt. As I said, cobalt is predominantly from byproducts of copper refining and nickel refining. Cobalt ores are very rare, but I thought, based on being here, I'll show some nice pictures of minerals and crystals. So I thought the earthite is probably the prettiest. But if you notice all these ores, which are very rare, they almost always seem to have arsenic in them. So, but generally, your cobalt's coming from your copper mining, and to some extent, so is your nickel. Unfortunately, they talk about in South Africa blood diamonds. They've kind of termed blood cobalt or blood batteries. Yes.
So you're saying it's a byproduct of copper, and of course we mine copper quite a bit for a long time. Should we mine the tailings for cobalt?
The question on should we mine the tailings of copper mines? Yes, that's actually my last bullet. So, yeah, so in terms of, you read a lot of stories, a lot of controversy of lithium-ion in terms of humanitarian crisis in like Congo. They have repeated violations of child and slave labor laws. Battery companies are very sensitive to that because it's certainly a black eye in lithium-ion battery world. So they're trying to guarantee that the cobalt is being mined responsibly instead of by these basically cobalt warlords. But unfortunately, as I said before, 59% of your cobalt is coming from Congo. Yes? Oh. I think it is. Cobalt-59, is that the only stable isotope? Look at my friend Don Kronauer, he's also working at Argonne. Yes, cobalt-60 is the radioactive one. Cobalt-60 is a relatively short half-life. So I'd have to look that one up. I used to work with a lot of nuclear people, so I could find that question. So, and about the cobalt deposits. So if you go to Cobalt Canada, there was a copper mine there, but they still called the city Cobalt Canada. But there's all these tailings piles there, and they know they're high in cobalt content, so they're looking into trying to refine that for cobalt. So in the same way, 50 years from now, we might be digging through our dumps looking for all our cell phones and laptops. Because your cell phone and laptop uses lithium cobalt oxide. So the most expensive one, because it has the highest energy density by volume. Because you'll notice you want your phone and your computer to be as small as possible. So that's why you pay a premium to have that small, high-energy battery, and that's why it's all mostly cobalt. Unfortunately, it's very easy to take this and throw it in the trash when it's dead, but you're throwing away a lot of cobalt, grams, but they make billions of these every year, and that adds up. Okay, almost done. Nickel sources. So it's mainly from two ores. You have laterite and pentlandite. So that's pentlandite is a magmatic sulfide deposit. Laterite is a mixture of limonite and ganorite. I show some pictures here of the millerite. Nice little fine crystal structure. That's nickel sulfide. Same with the pentlandite. It's basically iron nickel sulfides. And I guess also it will occur with some arsenic as well. So in terms of the market, this is coming from the national blueprints for lithium-ion battery. It's Argonne played a key part in putting this report together in 2021. So it's all based on the gigawatt-hour factories in the world. And you'll see that in 2020, China had 76% of all the factories. The United States had 8%. So we're producing about 59 gigawatt hours. A lot of that is the Tesla plant, and they're using the teams at Panasonic in Nevada. Now, if you just go out to 2025, look at the size of the world production. And these are factories that are being built. So this isn't one of those projections out what's going to happen 20 years from now. This is just 4 years into the future. These are factories that have been contracted and they broke ground. So we do gain, we go from 8% to 9%, 59 up to 224 gigawatt hours. But the rest of the world is, you look in Europe too, they're building gigawatt-hour factories too. So there's a huge push looking for more lithium, more cobalt, more nickel, all for EVs. It's, well, I should say EVs, but lithium-ion in general, grid energy storage as well. So the whole lithium-ion technology is not going away. It's well established and growing by the billions every year. Okay, and if you notice, China actually starts to lose 76%, they go down 73%, but they're still growing greatly if you look at the size of those two numbers. Okay, we lack critical materials, at least ones that, this is based on reserves. So reserves are considered minerals that are economically viable to take. So we have a fair amount of lithium, pretty low in cobalt, low in nickel. We have a lot of manganese, but we really don't use manganese or mine it in the United States because it's cheaper from other mines in the world. So always buy the cheap stuff first before you have to buy the expensive stuff. Now, I did a simple using the backpack calculations. If we made 1 million EVs with 100 kilowatt-hour batteries on one, we would need per year 10,000 metric tons of lithium, 7,000 metric tons of cobalt. And if you look at the size of these reserves, we could make, based on what we have with cobalt, we could make 7 million EVs with what's available right now in the United States. Ideally, we'd like to make hundreds of millions of EVs. Yes?
And what's our percentage of we use of lithium batteries? I mean, are we like 50% of the world's users?
The question is, what's the percentage of the United States use of lithium-ion batteries? I would say we're probably in that, I'm just spitballing, probably in that 20-30% range. China has invested heavily in lithium iron phosphate because they're, wisely or not, they looked at the amount of cobalt and nickel available in the world, and that's why they created part of this Belt and Road Initiative to have contracts with all these key countries with key minerals for the solar industry, for the battery industry, electronics, semiconductor industry. So we use a lot of lithium-ion batteries. So does Europe for EVs, for phones. If you look at India and China alone in terms of, they all have laptops, they all have computers, and that's almost 3 billion people right there. So in that terms, they're the larger users. But if you look in terms of how many gigawatt hours do we use, that's, I wouldn't have a good answer for that right now, but we're substantial. Okay. All right, explorations for new mineral sources. These are a few things that just came up last month. I thought were really interesting. Have a lot of advances in robotic technology, especially deep sea efforts. I've read about these manganese nodules down on the seafloor years ago, decades ago. Apparently, they're called polymetallic nodules. They're about 4 to 6 kilometers in the ocean. There's this region that Clarion-Clipperton Zone is about 1,500 miles off the coast of California, and they believe it contains enough nickel, manganese, cobalt, copper for 280 million EVs. So that's like 2 EVs per household in the United States. And that's just one region of the ocean. Now, this is a press release from the metals company, so we'll have to see. They're claiming that they can do this economically. But certainly as nickel prices and cobalt prices rise, then this is an option. And there's other regions in the oceans that are like this as well. So just like oil, in Pennsylvania, I think with oil, you just dug a hole in the ground and squirted it out. So after a while, you had to go out and dig deeper. But it's a nice picture of these modules. Apparently, they have this like developing a scooping basket, and then it goes over and dumps it off to a conveyor that brings it up to the surface. I'm curious to see. I'll be watching this over the years to see if that works out. Next, somebody mentioned about the ice, melting ice. Ironically, the melting glaciers are yielding needed minerals. So this was also just a few weeks ago on CNN article. This company, Cobalt Metals, they partnered with Blue Jay Mining, and they're looking for precious metals in Greenland. As the glaciers are melting, you're getting a lot more exposures. This is also happening in Antarctica, where Antarctica they're also finding more dinosaurs. There's also the Northwest Passage that's starting to open up over between up Canada, Alaska. So it's intriguing. You know, you hate to see the glaciers go, but they may be opening up new reserves. But now you have to build the infrastructure to get to these locations to capitalize on them. And this is funded by billionaires, Bezos, Bloomberg, and Gates. So, okay, my last take home is recycle your batteries. You know, when you're done with your phone, what do you do with it? If you're throwing it in the trash, you're throwing away cobalt. So a lot of stores, you just got to look at your local stores. I think maybe Best Buy, Home Depot. A lot of these places will take back your lithium-ion batteries from your laptops and your cell phones, because these two things use lithium cobalt oxide because they have the highest volumetric energy density. So we have a program at Argonne. It's a multinational lab program. We're trying to recycle materials. So you can think of one way is that we're importing cobalt from around the world and nickel from around the world. We shouldn't be throwing that away. In a way, we're harvesting these precious metals from other countries. We should be accumulating them in the United States. So that's where you really need to think in terms of recycling. So ultimately, everything comes from a mine. Then it gets refined, put into cathode production. Then you make it into a cell. That's what you see up there on the table. You use it. And worst case is when you throw it in a landfill. 100 years from now, 50 years from now, people are going to be going through landfills looking for these things. Yeah, just like nobody throws away catalytic converters. If you go to junkyards, there are mountains of catalytic converters. They just wait till the price is right, and then they start turning them in. So the idea behind the Resale Center is that finding different ways of recycling. Ideally, we'd like to take the powder, the powder you see in a little jar there. If we can extract that from the cell, and then just take that powder and put it right back into an electrode and put it back in the cell. So that's the direct recycling. That's the cheapest, easiest route. One of the concerns we have is that I mentioned before that not every lithium-ion has can have multiple different cathodes: NMC, LFP, lithium cobalt oxide, lithium manganese spinel. Right now, they're all called lithium-ion, so they all go into the recycling mill. So they have to try to separate out those different particles. Others just kind of do different hydroprocessing or pyroprocessing. But the idea is any of these three mechanisms, you try to get those materials and keep them in the loop. So that's one thing you can't do with oil. You burn oil, it takes thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years to form more oil. Here, we can do this on a routine basis and have a self-sustaining battery market. So just quickly show, I didn't do all this work myself. Some names, different labs, different facilities. The work all this work was all funded by the Vehicle Technologies Office, Department of Energy. And again, these are all my comments, not Argonne's. And any questions? Yes.
We're such a disposable country, which is rather shameful to me.
Yep.
And everything is made to be disposable. It's supposed to last this long, and everybody's kind of okay with it. I'm not really, but faced with something like this, why are not the computer companies that are doing, and the phone company, that are selling us the phones and whatever, having a more of a, hey, you buy a phone, you give us the phone and recycle it because this is such a precious commodity.
Yes.
Or becoming one. And, I don't know what else it may be in, but, what is, you can't recycle our alkaline batteries. I don't know that there's any benefit to that. Is there? Not sure.
Yeah.
Why are there not more recycling type programs out there to encourage this disposable country of ours to
Okay, I don't know if, well, I guess for the recording, why is there not more services available to recycle, make recycling easier for consumers? I would say if you look at the lead acid industry, they have like a 96, 97% recovery rate, for recycling rate for the lead. Partly because if you ever try to throw away a lead acid battery, I mean, your garbage man picks up the bag, he knows right away that something's up. But also because they have a $5, $10 deposit on that battery. You turn it in, when you buy your new battery, you get $10 for that old battery. So in a way, if you said, if you turn in your phone, I'll give you $5, yeah, people would be turning in their phones, turning in their laptops, or at least turning in those batteries. And you almost need to have it mandated to do that. In the lead acid world, they need that lead, because if you look at that chart, lead is available, but it's not tremendously abundant. It's also toxic, so you really just don't want, and lead acid, is sulfuric acid.
Car battery?
Yes.
Okay.
You don't want lead getting into your water stream. So there's a lot of environmental reasons to have that lead come back to the recycler to be recycled responsibly. Lithium-ion batteries, you really do need either, I don't know if the companies will do it per se, or if you need to have federal or state mandates to do it. But I guarantee if you start putting a dollar value on your old phone, people will turn them in. And that's kind of the initiatives you need. Eventually, it'll get to that point. If cobalt, the problem with cobalt is for higher nickel content, we still need a little bit of cobalt to stabilize it. So we're always going to probably have a little bit of cobalt in there, trying to get it down to 2, 3, 4, 5%. But if you can get people to, the price of cobalt will rise. And then some of these companies will start having, you'll start having shops say, bring in your phone, I'll give you $1, I'll give you $2. Your question about alkaline batteries, I'm not sure the recycling there. From my understanding, they mostly recycle the zinc casing. Manganese is an abundant, relatively abundant element. So, yes?
Seems to me when lithium batteries first came out, probably 20 or 30 years ago, they were catching fire on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah.
I've heard anything in recent years, until maybe last month or two, I heard of a truck or a bus or something that goes into flame.
Yeah. Yeah, those are usually internal shorts, and it's what keeps battery engineers up at night. Because if you think of a battery, you have an oxidant reductant. It doesn't need oxygen to burn. Once it, if you overheat the cathode, overcharge it, that oxygen comes off the lattice. So now I have oxygen coming out inside the cell, and it's in a solvent, a flammable solvent. And I have a negative right over there that's lithiated. It really wants to, give that electron to that oxygen. So then things can get overheated, and you can reach your flash point to your electrolyte easily. And if there's any sparking, because it's an electronic system, then it can ignite. In terms of people used to talk about the 6 sigma, one bad part for every million in a factory production. Lithium-ion manufacturing is way beyond that. So if you have one bad cell in 8 million, it's an automatic recall. So, but the problem, one of the things you have is that when somebody's, if this laptop goes into flames, half the people here are going to pull out their phone and start recording it and posting it on the internet. But you look how many times you go on the freeway and you see a car in flames. That's not an EV. That's, you have, look how many decades or century it took for cars to get to their safety standards. So batteries the same way. They're constantly trying to make better separator systems. There's the push to go to solid state electrolyte. They'll help the safety. It won't take away all the safety issues, because at the end of the day, you still have a lot of energy in a small space, and you have to respect that. It was just like gasoline. You have a 20-gallon gas tank or a 12-gallon gas tank. If you poured 12 gallons of gasoline on this floor, everyone's going to run. We've designed the car to try to be as safe as possible to handle gasoline. Electric vehicles, they're still working their way through it. Look at the old stories on, you look at the Model T, and then there's the Model A. The Model T came out before the Model A. The story I heard was Edison Ford went through A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way up to T, and then got down to Z, and then started over again, and that's how you have A. I don't know how true that is, but so there's always a lot of engineering, making it a little better, a little better, a little better, and lithium-ion batteries the same way. Since Sony came out in '91, you get a little bit of energy, a little bit of increase, 2, 3, 4, 5% every year, and a little bit safer. But yeah, there were spectacular fires with some of these systems. And that's why you can make a cell. Panasonic makes 1.2 million cells per day in the world. Now, if you look at, in the early days, they would have some what they call formation rooms. So you can make a cell like in a few seconds. And that cell then goes into a formation room where it's charged up and it's monitored for 1 to 3 weeks. So you can think of the logistics of that. You have a cell coming off that line every few seconds. That cell sits at the factory, this formation building, for 2 to 3 weeks, being monitored. Any slight deviation all normal, that one's picked out. I've been in some of these rooms. It's massive. It's like the Raiders of the Lost Ark when they're putting the Ark. It's just cavernous, and it's all robotic systems. There's probably only 10 people working in it. And just a robot zipping all the way, multi-stories, picking up a cell, bringing it over to the tester, tests it, brings it back, comes back a week later, picks it up, looks at it again. So it's truly an engineering feat at how good these cells are.
Things are always being perfected. When is it going to be economically more feasible to buy an electric car?
Yeah. The question is on when's it more economically feasible to buy an electric car, considering it's always been improved. I think, well, you look at, you're paying $5.50 for gas this year. It would be really nice to have an electric vehicle, if you could find one on the market. If you go back to gas engines, gasoline vehicles, it was decades before it was widely adopted. You were still using horse and buggies and an ox pulling carts all the way up into the 1920s and 30s, even though there's trucks. People couldn't quite afford them. They're expensive. You didn't have the infrastructure to support a gas engine vehicle, but eventually the market created that. I would say when you know that you can drive down the road and you can pull over and get a quick charge, and that's another program we have, quick charging. Try to charge a vehicle in 10, 15 minutes. Right now you can charge a vehicle in 30 minutes with a fast charger. Tesla has that feature, but you have to bring in the electrical utilities to make that happen. So when you can see when you start seeing charging stations everywhere, that's probably the time to get an EV. And that's one of the things you're going to be seeing over the next 5 years, charging stations everywhere.
As far as the future of batteries and EVs, is lithium going to be the basic metal all the way as far as we can see?
The question is lithium-ion or lithium going to be the metal, predominant metal in the batteries? I would say yes. It may not be NMC materials, but it's probably going to be lithium. And it's probably going to be called lithium-ion. So I'm going to show you all those lists of cathodes and anodes. They're all called lithium-ion batteries. They may not have any cobalt in them. Maybe they'll just be all manganese. Maybe it'll be an iron manganese. That's another thing we're going to say, like, ideally we use like a spinel or olivine, the LFP. They don't have as much energy density, but again, if you have charging stations everywhere, if I can get, my vehicle can go 200 miles and I can pull over and charge up in 20 minutes, it's not a big inconvenience. So, but you hear things about sodium-ion batteries, sodium batteries. Those are, because sodium is more plentiful than lithium, those are options, and they may make a lot of sense, like for grid energy storage, because they don't have as much energy density, but if you're putting out in the middle of a cornfield or next to a cornfield by a windmill or a solar farm, it's a stationary battery. I don't have to pick it up and move it like I do in a car. Oh, sorry.
There was an article in the MIT brief about 3 or 4 days ago talking about an aluminum sulfur salt.
Yes.
What's the prognostication in your mind for that?
There is, I think you might be referring to the Ambry battery. It's a molten system. They
I
had,
think that's the company they formed.
yeah, they talked to us, gosh, about 10 years ago, about our molten salt history experience. So mainly the issue is sealing it. But it's an intriguing system to look at. It's a molten metal on top and bottom, and then I believe molten salt in between. They had a few different variations. If you're talking about
This was aluminum, the electrodes were aluminum and sulfur.
aluminum and sulfur,
The
okay?
electrolyte was molten sulfur.
That,
That would run about 90 degrees C or something.
yeah, I'm not quite familiar with that one. There are a lot of aluminum primary batteries. So you can have aluminum air batteries, zinc air batteries. Often the problem is in trying to recharge them. So once you form aluminum sulfide, how easily can you have it go back to aluminum and sulfur? So there's also like the lithium sulfur battery. Sure. Oh,
Sounds pretty promising.
it does. Also, there's the lithium sulfur battery, which Argonne was working in back in the 60s, and a high temperature battery. And sulfur is one of the most abundant elements on the planet. We have mountains of it from oil refining and purifying. So you can get 50 or 100 cycles out of it. But what you really want to do is get to that 1,000 cycle mark. In the vehicle world, they look at 1,000 cycles, so that you have, if you get 200 miles per charge, 1,000 cycles, you're looking at 200,000 miles on the vehicle before the battery's done. And that's kind of where people are thinking, like gas engine vehicles. You can get 200,000 miles on a gas engine vehicle. The other issue is calendar life. You need that battery to last 10, 15 years. So that's not just a cycle problem. But yeah, there's the metal sulfide batteries. They're often considered like the holy grail for batteries. But economically, they have to work. You don't want to change that battery every 100 cycles. But I'm not sure. I'll have to look on that technology if they've come up with solutions for that.
So right now, Tesla, I think you can charge for free, right?
Um,
Wait till they start charging for charging. So.
yeah, it's like the question about Tesla and their charging stations. I would say they've done a really good job of making sure there's Tesla charging stations almost everywhere. I'm not.
They're about every 100 miles.
Yeah.
After they sold 200,000 or 300,000 of them, then they said after that, we're gonna charge. So now they're charging. If you buy a Tesla now, you're gonna get charged for those kind of stations.
I mean, how much does it cost to charge?
Usually it's about, I think some of the numbers I heard was like 4 cents a mile. So, yeah, yeah, fast charge, you'll probably pay extra for fast charge because that's a big convenience. Ideally they want people to charge at night when there's an abundance of electricity. That's what the power utilities want you to do, not during rush hours when electricity is in high demand. Oh, sorry, a question back there.
Learning curve and cost. You look at most of these big batteries, like in a Tesla, are made up of what look like little AA batteries that game together.
Yes.
And you want voltage, you go this way, you want amp hour to go that way. But the lower end are like in the 1,200, 2,000, and the high end ones are like in the 5,000 milliamp hour. And the 5,000s are like twice the price of the lesser ones. Are we going to see the lesser ones, the more powerful ones, come down? Is it just like that they're paying off the R&D and they're paying off building the factories, and that price is gonna come down to what the lower capacity ones are? Or, is there some fundamental reason why they're twice as expensive?
It's a question about Tesla and the cost of their battery and the cell system. As the cell system improves, this is what they originally started with, the 18650.
Yeah, it's like 18650s.
There was like 8,000, originally there was 8,000 of these,
Yeah,
which is a kind of a logistics issue when you had to line these things up. They've gone to slightly bigger diameters and a little bit higher. I think they call them 4170s now, so but it's still several thousand.
Like 13 series and 6 parallel.
Yes.
And the 13 series get you 48 volts, and the parallel gets you the number of amp hours.
Yeah.
But basically, it's also the density of this single cell. And is the density, is the price, the high density cells are twice the price of the low density cell. Is that because of,
I don't know about the density versus,
amp hours?
yeah, the amp is the size and the size of the cell.
Yeah, like one of those is anywhere from 1,200 to 5,000 milliamp hours.
Yeah, this is about 3 amp hours. You could get them up to like 4 amp hours, maybe this size, but then they get them up to like 5, 6 amp hours with the bigger format. The question with cylindrical cells, and basically all cells in a battery, keeping them cool enough that they don't go into thermal runaway. So in the Tesla, you can see these videos of the teardowns. They have cooling bands weaving in between these cells, trying to pull a little bit of heat. And there's just a little coolant flowing past it, just enough to pull the heat away. So if you get bigger in diameter, it's harder to pull the heat out from that center. So I've seen, and especially when you go to fast charge, because fast charge, you're still putting a lot of energy in, and there's always a little bit of inefficiency in energy. So that, could be 5% inefficient. So that energy builds up. You got to be able to pull that energy out during that fast charge. And that's really depending on your cooling fins or your cooling threads around it. So if you get too big, you can't pull that heat out from that center. So that's where the engineering comes in and thermal management. So it's, regarding the cost, they've gone to the bigger cell mainly so they won't have as many cells. Because if you have, in the original vehicles when it came out, they had about 8,000 of these. So now they're gone down to maybe 4,000. So if you have just one bad cell in a battery, you got to replace the battery. So now you have half the number of cells, so you're twice as reliable.
I know guys who do like RC planes and stuff like that, and people throw away, and then they test each one and find the bad one and replace it, and it's brand new.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, you can see these videos, people tearing down batteries, getting down to the module. It's risky because that's a 800-900 volt battery. So it's just the effort in going, tear that battery back apart. That could be, 2 technicians working for a day on that. That adds up in cost.
So I understand correctly that thing there, a billion of them is what drives the Tesla.
Oh, about 8,000 of these in the original Teslas, because they were kind of Elon smart about this. 18650s were really popular for laptop computers, right? If you ever see the thermal runaways of a laptop computer, you have one go off like a Roman candle, and then basically a few seconds later, another one goes off. So there's like 6 cells in series, and they're just going off like little Roman torches, Roman candles. But now you look at this laptop, laptops have gotten so thin, they can't use this anymore. Panasonic had invested billions into the factories to make these. And Elon Musk said, well, I want to make an electric vehicle. I want to use lithium-ion work. Can I just buy lithium-ion like you buy a AA battery or a D battery? And at that time, the only thing that existed was that close to that type of commodity scale was the 18650. And at that same time, laptops have gotten thinner. So they've gone to the prismatic, flat pouch designs like that. So, yes, they're called jelly rolls. So it was actually kind of a great timing and a good marriage that Panasonic said, hey, we got all these factories making 18650s. Elon Musk said, I'll buy those. And he just, the idea, he didn't have to think about the cell. He just had to think about the battery. How can I make a battery out of all these cells? And this, yeah, they call it jelly rolls because it's a white separator you're seeing, and these are the electrodes that are in it. So it's, you know, that's how you roll up in your jelly roll, and
You put those together and roll them up?
yeah, yep, energy in a can.